Hey y'all, I'm Emily of Patchwork Revival, and I am here to share some of my tips and tricks about making half square triangles. I am making this video tutorial to go along with my Sweater Weather Sampler 2025 block, Little Leaf. Here she is in the background, which as you can see is made almost completely of half square triangles. The pattern calls for 3 different ways to make half square triangles, and specifically multiple half square triangles at a time. So I cover 3 different methods in the pattern with measurements, diagrams, all the things, but I wanted to put together a little video tutorial just in case there are some people who maybe have never made half square triangles before, or maybe who have only tried 1 or 2 of these methods, and I want to make sure that I set you up for success as best I can. There are a couple of supplies that I recommend you have for making half square triangles, and one of those is a marking utensil. I like just a regular old graphite pencil. This washes out. It marks really nicely on light colored fabrics. If you have dark colored fabrics, you can use a chalk pen, like a chalk marker. And if you needed to mark something dark, you could try that. But I get good results marking on the lighter fabric using a just regular old mechanical pencil. You're going to need a pretty long edge, just straight edge. I use a lot of times just my good trusty old 8x14 ruler because I have that long edge to mark on. I also have this little doodad. It is a kind of a diagonal seam marker from Fons and Porter. It's an OmniGrid product. If you don't know who Fons and Porter are, please go look up Love of Quilting. I just love them. I grew up watching them with my grandmother, and I just love them. But this was a handy little tool. They have one that's long like this that I like. They also have a shorter one that's probably about half the size. But basically, you line up this yellow line along the diagonal, and then each side is a 1/4 inch from the middle marking. So that way you have lines that you can sew on, which sometimes helps with accuracy. Um, the biggest thing when it comes to making half square triangles, even whether it's 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 4 at a time, 8 at a time, is you really need to focus on number 1, cutting your starting pieces accurately and carefully. Take your time cutting. It's not a race. The other thing is you really, really, really need to hone in on an accurate 1/4 inch seam. I tend to sew on the side of the scant 1/4 inch seam. So basically, I have my 1/4 inch seam on my machine. I know exactly how to do it. I've done it long enough that I can do it really easily. I know how to line my things up with my patchwork piecing foot, and I can get a really accurate 1/4 inch seam that way. But if you're not used to doing that, it's going to take some practice, and it's okay. Just practice, practice, practice. If you make a stitch, a seam line that you don't like, that's why you have a seam ripper. It's not a big deal. You can use it. Just use it. It's cool. It's fine. Also, it's fine to just let it go. Okay. You want your seam allowance to be large enough. So a 1/4 inch seam is basically large enough so that when you press something, you will have plenty of fabric there so that you're not just going to like bust through it. So you'll see some people, especially I think beginner quilters, who start quilting and then they actually do the quilting of their quilt top and they start noticing their seams are pulling apart. Typically that's because they have more like an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance instead of a 1/4 of an inch. So really take your time, focus on a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. The other thing is know how to mark your fabric. I know that when it comes to a little square like this, it might be really tempting to just take this to your machine and think, I can eyeball that just right down. You cannot. Do not. Just don't. Don't do it. Just take the time to mark it. You're going to be so much happier that way because you're just going to get better results and you're going to spend less time being sad and less time seam ripping. Just take some time to mark your fabric, okay? Um, I want to start with the 2 at a time half square triangle method. So I'm going to set some of these aside. And I think in my experience, the 2 at a time half square triangle method is one of the most commonly used and most popular. I think it's great because it requires relatively small cuts of fabric. This is all you need. So you could very easily go to your fabric stash, look in your scrap bin, and be able to find like a 5-inch square, a 4.5-inch square, and make a couple of half square triangles out of it. So these are my 2 squares that I'm going to have to make my half square triangle, and using the 2 at a time method. And you're going to notice what a lot of things say, pattern instructions, mine included in my little leaf pattern, say to mark a line down the center of this fabric. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to do that using just a regular old mechanical pencil. When you're marking, use a light touch. If you use a really heavy touch, you could catch the end of your fabric and kind of see how that shifts a little bit or stretches. That's because this is a bias. That's the bias of your fabric, of your triangle. So you don't want to warp that too badly, okay? The other thing that I am doing for these purposes is just to show you what it's going to look like. So when you put this down, I went ahead and I like very darkly, more dark than I normally would have, tried to trace what it would look like where your seam lines are actually going to be on this fabric. So you basically mark a line down the center of the fabric, diagonal to diagonal, corner to corner, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch on either side of the diagonal line. Some people simply mark the diagonal line and then use a presser foot, a 1/4 inch like piecing foot, and that's totally fine. If you go ahead and mark the lines, then you know that you sew on the lines. So you're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the center diagonal line. And this is going to go on top, right sides together. I'm using solids, so it doesn't matter so much. Right sides together of your 2 fabrics. So background and then fabric A or whatever. So I've gone ahead and sewn a 1/4 inch away from the center line that was marked right here. I used black and white so that hopefully we would get a high contrast and you can see this. So I did go ahead and sew that. So now basically what you can see is I have a half square triangle here and a half square triangle here. So what I need to do is just cut right here. I used my rotary cutter. You can use scissors. Everybody's different. I'm going to use this little guy because I know it's nice and sure. Boop. Okay. So it's a pretty good 1/4 inch seam. That's a pretty good 1/4 inch seam. It's a little on the scant side, but it's good enough. So now what we do, we press it open and we have 2 half square triangles. So you can see those there. Now, whenever you make multiple half square triangles, you're going to have to trim these, and everybody trims them differently. Some people will open their half square triangle and trim it. That's fine. I don't really like to do that. I like to batch work. So I will make a bunch of half square triangles. I will, before I open them up, trim all of the ones I need to trim. Then I'll press all of them open. Then I'll snip those little dog ears off, and then I'll be done. So that's how I make 2 at a time half square triangles. Let me finish trimming this one. I tried to trim this one with a dull rotary blade, and I should just left that part in because I feel like that was a really good way to prove the point that you should change your rotary blade. But anyway, now you're going to see we have two half square triangles. Snip, snip. They're totally identical. They're done. That's it. So that's how you make 2 at a time half square triangles.